Those to you here on GB News. He's going to set out measures which the Treasury says will provide fiscal sustainability. Well, the shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury told us that mismanagement has undermined trust in the UK economy.
You see this panicked reaction where the Chancellor has to bring forward by 2 weeks his rescue package of a plan that was only announced 3 weeks before by the Prime Minister and his predecessor. Then you just see what chaos has been caused.
GB News has learnt that officers from the committee who choose how Conservative leaders are chosen, the 1922 committee, are going to meet later today. The committee's executive can change the rules of leadership balloting and no confidence voting, which would lead to a leadership challenge. Well, it comes after 3 Conservative MPs publicly called for Ms Truss to resign. Other news now. Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley says hundreds of police officers should be sacked following a new report commissioned after the death of Sarah Everard. A review of the Met's internal misconduct system found by Baroness Louise Casey that officers are getting away with criminal behaviour owing to an anything-goes attitude. The report described some of the police procedures as being racist and misogynistic. The former detective Superintendent Shabnam Chowdhury told us she's sickened by the report.
This isn't just a barrel of rotten apple. This is a disease that has spread across the Metropolitan Police, unfortunately. I don't deny that there are some fantastic officers. There are many good and hard-working officers who don't want this kind of behaviour, who have tried to call it out, who have tried to support those officers, but there are too many in the leadership roles that don't allow those complaints to go any further.
International news now, and the Ukrainian Air Force say they've shot down 37 Russian drones in the last 24 hours. Well, the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, has been hit this morning with several explosions caused by these so-called kamikaze drones. The Kyiv mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, says at least 1 person's been killed and 3 people are in hospital. Several residential buildings have been damaged and there have been fires in a central district of the city. Search operations continue to rescue those who are stuck in the rubble. The Scottish Government will set out its economic plans for an independent Scotland later today. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, says independence will lead to a fairer and wealthier country. She also claims the UK's economic model is failing and holding Scotland back. The Supreme Court's currently deciding whether Scotland can hold a referendum next October without the agreement of Westminster. More than 400,000 health workers in England, Wales and Northern Ireland will be balloted over industrial action in continuing disputes over pay. Unison says members of several health unions, including nursing and ambulance staff, as well as cleaners, will vote in the coming weeks on whether to walk out. It said the government decision to award a £1,400 pay rise in the summer had angered staff. Almost 1 million NHS workers could be involved in strike action before Christmas. 2 Just Stop Oil protesters have climbed on top of the Dartford crossing. That's forced police to close the bridge linking Essex and Kent. A spokesperson for Essex Police said it may take some time to resolve the situation because of the difficulty in getting the protesters down safely. Well, a Just Stop Oil spokesperson, Samuel Johnson, had this to say to GB News earlier.
We need to stand up to this government. We're in a cost of living crisis, we're in a climate emergency, and the government is going completely the wrong direction. The International Energy Agency has said we need no new oil. The United Nations has said we need no new oil. We are saying we need no new oil.
The King will meet families from war-torn countries who've moved to Aberdeen today. It's part of a government scheme to resettle refugees in the city. The monarch will hear how Aberdeen City Council supported people from Ukraine, Syria and Afghanistan, as well as hearing personal stories from families on their evacuation and how they've now settled in the community. You're up to date on GB News. I'll bring you more as it develops across the day. Now let's head to the point.
A very good morning to you. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, this morning on your TV, radio and online. I'll be with you throughout the morning, keeping you up to date as the fate of the Prime Minister hangs in the balance and the new Chancellor tries to take charge. Well, the new Chancellor Jeremy Hunt will be bringing forward new economic measures from the planned medium-term fiscal plan this morning. How will the market react to this announcement? Indeed, how is it reacting already? Amid reports of letters from backbenchers going into Sir Graham Brady and the 1922 committee, will these measures be enough to save the Prime Minister's tenure once in office? And in other news, the Ukrainian capital city of Kyiv has come under attack by Russian drones this morning. Are we seeing increasing desperation in Russian attacks on civilian targets? We'll be going live to Kyiv to bring you the latest. We've all got that coming up and so much more across the programme, so get in touch with your views as usual. gbviews@gbnews.uk. That's the address to email into. Now, the main story driving this morning. The new Chancellor will make a statement at around 11 a.m, bringing forward measures from his medium-term fiscal plan to support fiscal sustainability. The announcement comes a fortnight earlier than expected and will fast-track billions of pounds worth of tax rises and potentially spending reductions. It comes as Liz Truss is facing more pressure this morning after 3 of her own MPs called on her to resign. Well, let's discuss this firstly. I'm joined delightfully by this really quite established panel. John Longworth is the former MEP, now directs the Independent Business Network, and Liam Halligan is our business and economics editor. Good morning to you both. And firstly, let's start with you, Liam. There has been some movement in the markets this morning. How are those traders responding to what we know so far?
The main thing we're looking at, Tom, in the market is what we call the 10-year gilt yield. We're talking about it quite a lot these days. That's the rate at which the government borrows money for 10 years, the interest rate the government must pay. And it was up about 4.3, 4.4, 4.5% in the aftermath of the mini-budget. Since we've heard that the Treasury will be making a statement, the new Chancellor Jeremy Hunt will be making a statement and bringing forward at least part of this sort of medium-term financial strategy, basically the government's working of how it's going to make the sums add up. Then that gilt yield has fallen from 4.3 to about 4.1%. Quite a big shift. Why is this important? This is important because this is the benchmark rate of interest from which all mortgages, new mortgages and remortgaging and personal loans are based. So this is like the lowest level of interest rate you're going to get in the economy. All other interest rates, by definition, that consumers and firms have to deal with will be higher than that.
So really, really important there, not just the cost of government borrowing, but also the interest rates on people's mortgages and everything else. John Longworth, you were welcoming various parts of this package, but I think of this package that is now being undone, I should stress, this all of the various tax cuts that were meant to boost growth, they're now being picked apart. One element that got far too little discussion, perhaps, over the last 3 weeks was the energy price freeze, the energy price guarantee, as the government calls it. It's a universal measure to fix the prices at potentially the cost of hundreds of billions of pounds. John Longworth, was this a mistake from the previous Chancellor?
Yeah, of course it is. Just to contextualise this first, this was a huge opportunity to get Britain on the track of growth, which is a different economic track than the orthodoxy that's been employed for the last 40 years while we've been members of the European Union, and also different from many other countries, which is one of the reasons why they don't like it, because if it was successful, it would really hold a mirror up to those who prefer austerity. They actually had the right policies, Messrs. Truss and Kwarteng. Quasinomics was the right policy fundamentally, and not too much of a departure from what has happened in the past, in the sense it wasn't a radical budget, it was a very sensible growth budget. And instead of that, we're now choosing austerity. And the irony is, of course, that you've got Labour pointing in two directions now, choosing austerity on the one hand, and then saying that they're going to support the majority of Truss's proposals on the other. They can't have it both ways. But they did walk into a perfect storm. And the perfect storm, of course, was that we had a massive debt burden that has been created by spending during unnecessary lockdowns on supporting people not to go to work. Our business network said all along that they should be supporting people to go to work, not to not go to work. And also, of course, shoving out through the door loans to businesses, which are, many of which are now proving to be fraudulent.
And yet,
in fact,
John Longworth, the United Kingdom has a lower debt burden than basically any other G7 advanced economy. Lower debt than the United States, than Canada, than Japan, than France, than Italy.
Yeah.
It's only Germany that has a lower debt burden than the United Kingdom in that group. Why then, let's bring in Liam Halligan now, why then did the markets take such fright at United Kingdom proposals that actually would keep our debt lower than all of those countries?
Because the real issue for advanced countries, Tom, isn't your overall debt stock up to a point. It's the rate of increase in your borrowing. And there were a number of things going on here. There was the fact that the Bank of England didn't raise interest rates the day before the mini-budget nearly as much as they led the market to believe. Massive miscommunication by the Bank of England again. The fact also that the Bank of England was starting its programme of, hang on to your hats, what we call quantitative tightening. Yes, that's a new one. What does that mean? That means that the Bank of England sells bonds into the market rather than buying bonds from the market, making those bonds that the government are also trying to sell at the same time even less attractive and therefore more expensive for the government to borrow. And also, at the same time, you had what I said before in the last hour, the fact that the British government, because we have a lack of energy storage, because we ridiculously closed down that rough undersea gas storage facility off the Yorkshire coast, because our nuclear power stock is pretty debilitated, even though we were the first ever civilian nuclear power. All that means that if there is a real ramping up in energy prices, if the Russia-Ukraine war gets really, really nasty in terms of the Kremlin just going no and cutting all gas to Western Europe, then Britain, I would say, and I say this with huge displeasure and weighing my words carefully, we are pretty heavily exposed. So we will pay a lot of money for our wholesale gas because we haven't got much in storage. So delivering that energy price cap will cost a lot. And gilts will get very, very, very expensive for the government to borrow. And these things were going on in the minds of traders when they decided, for now, to pick on sterling and the British government.
Well, let's bring John Longworth back here. John, when it comes to that over-leveraging on energy, do go ahead.
Well, I was just about to say, I was also saying that the government have actually given out loans that the Treasury are now not going to try and retrieve. They've announced they're not going after the fraudulent loansters. And on top of that, we have a huge debt that has been created by the energy price cap support. And that support is there purely because the government chose the most expensive route to net zero. This was Boris Johnson. We had a situation where we're working towards net zero. We can only affect 1% of global CO2 output. So it's really all virtue signalling. It's of no practical benefit to the climate change issue. And yet we're impoverishing people, creating fuel poverty. People will be freezing to death this winter. And we've actually destroyed a growth economic agenda because of the debt and costs that have been created by choosing the most expensive route to net zero. And don't forget, when that initial price cap came in, the Ukraine war hadn't started. So all those initial extra costs on people's energy bills was caused purely by deciding to rely on unreliable and expensive green energy from wind, when actually we should have been doing something else.
Certainly. I suppose, just finally, we do have to go to a break, but I do want perhaps a sentence from both of you here. Is there any hope now? The government's junked its tax-based growth strategy. Might there be something left in supply-side reform, which we have been continually promised now and may well come about over the next 2 weeks? Liam first.
It will take a great deal of political will. Supply-side reform is tough. Supply-side reform means things like sorting out the planning system so we can get more infrastructure built. Supply-side reform means taking away some of the regulation which big business likes because it's got massive compliance departments and it knows it ties up its smaller rivals in red tape. Supply-side reform, aside from tax cutting, which is the ultimate supply-side reform, means taking on massive vested interests. I don't think the Conservative Party in Parliament or in government has got the energy to do those kind of hard yards at the moment.
John, in your view, does this Prime Minister have the authority? Does the Conservative Party have the energy to get through any of that supply-side reform? Or are we in a very, very bleak place?
Well, tragically, I think we are in a bleak place. There's no question. I mean, Truss really has no relevance now. Hunt's running the show. And what all the things that we've talked about so far did was give an opportunity for the blob, for the people who want to rejoin the European Union, for the people who like asset values rather than actual enterprise and work and production, to take over the reins of government and to bring us right back to where we would have started, say, in 1972, where we're back to the rule of the blob. And what we really need is to encourage enterprise and investment and hard work to get the economy going. And actually, Britain, up until that budget, was doing well. Second lowest GDP to debt ratio, where we're tracking growth in Germany right from 2016 to the present day.
Yes.
We've got massively lower unemployment, especially youth unemployment, than Germany or the rest of the EU. We were doing quite well. And this has turned the clock back. And if Labour were to take over, what would they do? They would end up having to do exactly the same thing, or they would have to be brave and adopt a Keynesian growth agenda. And if they were to actually do that, I think we'd probably find there's quite a lot of business groups would support them.
Although potentially the markets would make borrowing even more expensive. It's hard to see how it'd be particularly different under Labour at this term in terms of market reaction. But, gentlemen, I'm afraid we do have to go to a break now. Thank you so much for your expert analysis over the past 15 minutes. We will be getting more into the politics of this after the break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
It's 10:22. This is To The Point with me, Tom Harwood, on GB News. We're live on your television, online and on your radio as well. Well, will the measures to be announced by the Chancellor in just under an hour's time do anything to quell the unrest amongst Tory backbenchers. 3 MPs have so far said that they've submitted no confidence letters in the Prime Minister Liz Truss, and a number of others have been less than subtle about their intentions too. This comes as I learn that officers of the 1922 committee, those are the most senior executive members, are meeting later today to discuss the Prime Minister's future. Well, joining me now to talk about this in more detail is Benedict Spence, the political commentator and writer. Thank you for joining us, Benedict. First of all, it really does not seem like Liz Truss is Prime Minister in anything more than name. Is Jeremy Hunt running the show?
Jeremy Hunt and a few other people behind the scenes, yes, but ultimately that's the state of play. I don't think Jeremy Hunt would have accepted the role of being her Chancellor, given the state that she was in, without getting most of the power as part of the deal. And I don't think that Liz Truss is long for this world politically. And what we will have as a result of that remains to be seen. I mean, plenty of people were angry enough that Liz Truss became Prime Minister, having just been put to a vote of Tory members. Well, this hasn't even been put to a vote of Tory members, and even in the in the leadership ballot amongst his own MPs, Jeremy Hunt wasn't especially popular. So whether or not this can do much to quell the discontent on the backbenchers, I mean, certainly I think that he'll have slightly more support than Liz Truss does at the moment. But realistically, it's a sorry state of affairs that the party finds itself in.
There's 3 MPs who've publicly called on Liz Truss to go. Many reports that there could be up to 3 figures who have privately said that she must go. What are the dynamics here in terms of letters being sent to Graham Brady? Because, of course, there is that immunity period of 1 year between leadership ballots.
Yes, and I don't think actually that the 1922 committee will be particularly keen to change its rules. It can do if it wants to, but I think that there will be, I think that that's more just a sort of an ominous looming threat that has hung over a prime minister to make it clear that the gig is up, to make it clear to say, well, one way or another you will be going. Don't try to make this too drawn out. Just toddle off because we say that you're not going to be able to get anything through Parliament. The cabinet doesn't support you. The party doesn't support you. But I do think in many ways it sort of shows a weakness within the Conservative Party itself. And I mean, we go back to the Boris Johnson period, and for months and months, people were saying there are letters going in. Are there enough? Aren't there enough? But there just wasn't that sort of killer instinct. Nor would I say was there actually the confidence within a lot of the runners behind Boris Johnson to succeed him. Now, right now, I think actually we've got a similar sort of situation. We've got Jeremy Hunt who's effectively saying, I'm going to take charge of the situation. But I really don't think that he wanted it sort of put up to a ballot of MPs or members. Nobody else is really throwing their hat into the ring. We have Penny Mordaunt, who was touted as a potential successor in the Telegraph today, saying we need to stand by the Prime Minister, presumably because either she knows that it would be very difficult to win a leadership contest were the rules to be changed, or because actually she just doesn't want to take over the mess that she'd be inheriting, which is even worse than it was under Boris Johnson. So the fact that you have only 3 that have come out publicly and said it, even though everyone knows this Prime Minister is toast, I think it shows actually just how unsound the party is, how shaky its own confidence is, that there isn't sort of the ballast for enough MPs to actually stick their head above the parapet and and pull the trigger on what is already a premiership that is effectively over.
Well, of course, there's been so much commentary about how Liz Truss only managed to garner a third of the parliamentary party for votes in order to get through to that final 2. That commentary ignores the fact that Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt both also only managed to get around a third of the parliamentary party getting through to the final 2. It wasn't like the 2019 election where Boris Johnson had the overwhelming majority, or the 2017 election where Theresa May had the overwhelming majority. This was a very divided party before the leadership contest. No clear favourite, no one to coalesce around. Perhaps that's what's saving Liz Truss.
It was, and actually the party's been very divided for decades now. I know that people like to think that, a lot of Remainers especially like to say that Brexit was just, David Cameron's attempt to unify his party. But Brexit and the Europe question was just one issue of where the Conservative Party fault lines lie. Now, obviously, everybody knows the sort of the divide between Truss and Sunak. But there are other fault lines within the party as well. And this is the difficulty, of course, is that you might replace Liz Truss with another leader who ends up being just as unpopular. And I think we also do need to understand that part of what is done for Truss isn't necessarily just that she's unpopular with her own backbenchers. It's that actually she has become the Prime Minister at an incredibly volatile time in terms of international markets. It's, whilst the pound was plummeting against the dollar and everybody was sort of setting fire to their order papers and going, oh, it's a disaster, she's crashed the economy. Similar things were happening across Europe as well. And since then, currencies have rallied. This is a situation where, almost on the flip of a coin, a prime minister could come off as economically incompetent or a genius if the currency happens to go the other way. That's how febrile I think the situation is. And so, if you were to stand or step forward and say, yes, that's right, I want to be leader of the Conservative Party, you are a hostage to fortune in a way that somebody like Boris Johnson just wasn't, because Boris Johnson, of course, built his brand, made it almost bulletproof over decades, to the point where he was able to sort of straddle all sides of the party because it was recognised he was electorally far more valuable than most of the other so-called big beasts.
Perhaps Boris Johnson is thinking, phew, at least I got removed before all of this took place. I suppose any Prime Minister who tried to do a sort of £200 billion potential spending package on energy would face similar market turmoil. Perhaps Boris Johnson's kicking his feet up and thinking, you know what, I might try and return once this is all past. But for now, Benedict Spence, thank you for joining us this morning on The Briefing. Really, really interesting stuff there. Let's now turn to how this turmoil is going down with the public. Well, our Yorkshire reporter Anna Riley is in Hull to find out. And Anna, what's the mood like in Hull?
It's a mixed opinion, really. So I've been out on the streets here in Hull speaking to people about Jeremy Hunt, what they think to him as the new Chancellor, and whether they think that the former Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, should have been sacked. And I've also been getting the mood from people as to what they think to the Prime Minister, if they think Liz Truss should resign, and if she were to, should there be a general election? So firstly, on those questions around Jeremy Hunt, this is what people had to say.
But he's probably one that you wouldn't have him as your first choice, since he'd already work so well for about 60% of it. But we need someone that's 100% committed to it. They're going to try to do what they say to do.
I mean, if they've appointed him and got rid of the other guy, he must have some inkling what to do next. So maybe that's why they put him in that position.
If it's anything to do with the Conservatives, I don't trust them. So let's say no.
Yeah.
So people's views there on Jeremy Hunt, and speaking to them about Liz Truss, like we've been talking about, there's those 3 MPs that have spoken out against her, and I've been out asking the public if they think she should resign, and this is what they had to say.
She got there, and perhaps she should be given a fair chance to carry on. She's got things wrong, we know that, but I don't think there should be another general election. I think it'll just make everything worse.
She should be given a few more months, at least till the start of Christmas. Just, shall we say, coin a phrase, let her get a grip of the full situation, because she's still new, isn't she?
Not doing what she said she'd do. So I think she should retire.
So a real mixture of opinion there. People saying, give her a chance, she's not had long enough in office yet, but others saying, no, go out the door and resign, but not have a general election.
Interesting stuff there. And Anna Riley, thank you so much for bringing us the views there from Hull. Really appreciate it. We'll catch up with you a little bit later on, no doubt. Let's turn to what people at home have been writing in throughout the show this morning. Liam Halligan remains with me here. And firstly, there's a lot of people who are upset about the removal of Boris Johnson, thinking that this is a bit of a mistake, that things might have not been so bad had he not been removed. Marianne had written in saying, where's our democracy gone? People voted for Brexit, they got called plebs. And there was talk of a reversal by MPs. People voted largely for Boris, and he's ousted by his own peers. Would we be in a better situation if Boris was still Prime Minister?
I think the what if is always difficult in all walks of life, isn't it? But I think it's true that there's a lot of people, particularly Red Wall voters, who voted Tory for the first time in 2019, really the people who put Boris Johnson in Downing Street, who feel that they voted for a Prime Minister. He wasn't, it would be a brave person who said Boris Johnson wasn't, at least to some sense, the architect of his own downfall to some degree. But I think for a lot of the public, across the red wall voters, they think that Boris Johnson was basically ousted by MPs who didn't like him, just as the same voters feel that Brexit was almost reversed by MPs who didn't like the way that the referendum turned out. There's a sort of similarity there.
Now, we do only really have 30 seconds before we must go to the news, but Margaret in Bristol has written in saying, what a mess we're in. I feel utterly despondent about our country. People, she thinks that the Labour Party is almost certain to get in, and that would mean even higher taxes than we are now. Can you offer Margaret any hope?
Well, that's Margaret from Bristol. Of course, it was Brenda from Bristol who said, what, another one? And told that there was going to be another general election. I really don't think that the public has got much appetite for a general election. A lot of people in the political media class, not least opposition MPs, might want one, but I can't see how that would resolve very much. What we've got to do is get this economy moving. And I don't see that the high tax, high spend policies are going to do that to a greater extent than the Kwarteng Trust policies. But in general, I'd say, I think, look, the UK is solvent. This is far more a political crisis, in my view, than an economic crisis.
Key points to end there on. After the break, we turn to Kyiv, the Ukrainian capital city, where kamikaze drones have been raining down on civilian targets. We'll get the latest from the ground there after the news headlines.
Good morning, 10:33. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date today on GB News. Now, the newly appointed Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, is preparing to deliver parts of his medium-term economic plan today. That's coming now a fortnight earlier than expected. He's been in talks with the Prime Minister over the weekend, as well as the Governor of the Bank of England and the Debt Management Office, to brief them on his plans. Jeremy Hunt will make a statement this morning, and then he'll address the House of Commons later, setting out measures which the Treasury says will provide fiscal sustainability. The Treasury says the plans will be released in full at the end of this month. The shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury told us a fourth Conservative Chancellor in 4 months isn't going to fix the UK economy.
You can't recover from the kind of ideological recklessness that led to where we are this morning just by appointing a new Chancellor and announcing some partial U-turns. The situation's more serious than that.
GB News has learned that officers of the 1922 committee will meet later amid growing calls from some Tory MPs for the Prime Minister to step down. The committee's executive can change the rules of leadership balloting and no confidence voting, which could lead to a leadership challenge. 3 Conservative MPs have already publicly called for Ms Truss to resign. On the news now, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, says hundreds of police officers should be sacked following the findings of a new report commissioned after the murder of Sarah Everard. A review of the Met's internal misconduct system found that officers are getting away with criminal behaviour. The report described some of the police procedures as racist and misogynistic. International news now, and the Ukrainian Air Force says it's shot down 37 Russian drones in the last 24 hours. The Kyiv mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, says at least 1 person's been killed. 3 people are in hospital following so-called kamikaze drones that hit the capital this morning. Several residential buildings have been damaged and there have been fires in a central district of the city. We're on your TV, online and DAB+ radio. It's GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good morning, it's 10:38 and this is To The Point with me, Tom Harwood, on GB News. We're live on your television, online and of course DAB plus radio this morning too. The Ukrainian Air Force now say they've shot down 37 Russian drones in the last 24 hours. As the capital city of Kyiv, with several explosions caused by the so-called kamikaze drones. The Kyiv mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, says that several residential buildings have been damaged and there have been fires in a central district of the city, and at least one person has apparently been killed. Well, joining us now live from Kyiv is Ukrainian MP Kira Rudik. And Kira, thank you so much for joining us at this time when your city is being attacked. Can you first tell us exactly where you believe the targets for this reign of terror are?
Hello, thank you so much for having me. The targets are very random, but they are definitely civilian targets. So one of the explosions happened right here. You can see it from my home, and these explosions were aimed to the energy infrastructure building that is located nearby. However, the other ones were to the civilian buildings, to people's homes, and we just learned that one person was killed under the rubble. And this is so terrifying. You know, today I woke up 7 a.m. of the sound like a motorcycle. And we all know what the sound means, because right after you hear it, you hear a hit and then an explosion. It is the sound of Iranian kamikaze drones. The Russians started using them very frequently recently to create targeted attacks on people's homes and on infrastructure. And this is extremely scary because they have much more of them than the missiles and rockets, and they're using them just against anything they want. And it's harder to intercept the drones rather than rockets. So while we are still asking the world to help us with Air Force protection systems, we need to be one step ahead and already work on more sophisticated systems to prevent the attacks of those drones. Because what happens usually when they hit is an explosion and then a fire that is very hard to put up.
It is really terrifying and frankly cowardly of the Russian state to be sending these unmanned killing machines. It does, I suppose, evoke those images of what we called during the Nazi blitz on London, the doodlebugs, the V1 and V2 rockets, unmanned as they were, that the Nazis sent over London to kill civilians in the 1940s. It seems like it's a very similar situation now with the Russians and Kyiv.
It is, and I don't know if you can hear it, but we have like the air raid sirens on right now. This means that in a couple of minutes, there could have been another attack of the drones. The issue that we have again is that though with all the sanctions and with all the plans of the democratic world of make sure that Iran is not producing any kinds of weapons, they were doing that, and they are right now supplying them to their friends in Russia. So the fight expands to not only fighting Russia, but all the tyranny regimes that are there to create weapons to kill us. And right now we will be asking for sanctions on Iranian regime as well, and making sure that everybody who is involved into killing innocent people here in Ukraine, here in Kyiv, will be punished.
A new axis of evil being drawn up between these unfree and undemocratic parts of the world. Beyond sanctions on Iran, what is it that you want to see countries like the United Kingdom doing to help your cause and hopefully bring this war to a more timely conclusion?
We need more weapons. So still, we did not get enough weapons to support our defense, and then to support our ability to get our territories back. We have been getting some, and we are extremely grateful for them, but we need much more. You see, before the war, Russia was second largest army in the whole world. And it's not with the bravery of their soldiers, which is none, but it's with the amount of weapons, rockets, supplies that they had. And to be able to give them the right pushback, we need all democratic world and United Kingdom as a leader of that to provide us with all possible and impossible weapons that we have. You see, Russia is ramping up their game. What are we doing as Democratic Alliance?
Now, just finally, we are seeing some reports that Vladimir Putin may well be rolling back on his partial mobilisation commitment, on that calling up of non-regular members of the armed forces. What's the latest you've heard on Russia's partial mobilisation?
Indeed, they say that they will wrap it up. First, because in autumn they will have a regular mobilization and it will bring them even more soldiers. Second, because Putin has seen that the mobilization is not giving him support of Russians, because the war becomes very real for them. And this is why we do believe that he will wrap it up and start working on a different strategy that may include using the nuclear weapon, when he will still use the paternalistic pattern saying, Russian people, you don't have to worry about anything. I will take care of that, even if I have to resort to the last possible way of winning. So this is why it's all very, it worries us a lot. I can tell you, I have a backpack for potential nuclear attack stored for myself and my family here under the stairs, because we think it is very real.
Wow, what a profound image. Well, I hope you and your family remain very, very safe as your city is under such relentless attack from such unprovoked aggression. Kira Riddick, thank you so much for joining us here on To The Point on GB News. Slava Ukraini. Now, the trial of former NHS nurse Lucy Letby is entering its second week, as legal experts expect the case to go on for at least 6 months. Letby stands accused of attacking newborn babies, including by insulin poisoning and injecting infants with air, causing them to stop breathing. This during an alleged killing spree between 2015 and 2016. Now, Sophie Reaper has the latest from Manchester.
Letby trial is continuing here at Manchester Crown Court today. The former nurse has been charged with the murder of 7 babies and the further attempted murder of 10 babies. This was while she was working on the neonatal unit at the Countess of Chester Hospital. She denies all of the charges against her. Now, the trial began last week, where we heard from both the prosecution and the defence. They gave their opening statements. The prosecution went first, and they began by giving the jury the details around all of the children involved in this case, from child A all the way through to child Q. They then went on to present the jury with just some of the evidence that will be used in this case, including a post-it note that was found by police in Lucy Letby's home. Now, on the note, it said things like, "I killed them on purpose because I am not good enough and I am a horrible, evil person." Once the prosecution came to a conclusion, the defence then began with their opening, and they asked the jury to not let emotion overtake reason in this case and for them to hear all of the evidence before they made a judgment. Now, today we're expecting to hear from two intelligence analysts from the Cheshire Police who will give evidence around the sequence of events between June of 2015 and June of 2016, which is when Lucy Letby allegedly carried out her attacks.
Well, we'll be following that trial incredibly closely. Really profound stories coming out of that. Now, hundreds of Metropolitan Police officers should be sacked for committing misconduct. That's according to the new Met Police Commissioner. Met Police Chief Sir Mark Rowley says that he wants to get rid of hundreds of staff he claims are guilty of crimes and unethical conduct. Well, joining to discuss this in more detail is Timothy Brain, the former Chief of Gloucestershire Police. And Mr. Brain, it seems that there isn't a day when the police aren't in the headlines for this kind of misconduct. Is this endemic in our police forces around the UK?
Well, there's no evidence that it's endemic in police forces around the UK. There is now quite a lot of gathering evidence that it is pervasive, certainly in some parts of the Metropolitan Police. And that's a very large proportion of the UK's police force. In England and Wales, the Met represents about a quarter of all policing in England and Wales. So it's a very, very large force. It's a large force in the world. It's a very large force to lead and successfully administer and manage. And that probably is at the heart of many of the problems we're seeing now. It's just very big. This certainly the evidence is now becoming overwhelming that there is a certainly systemic problem that has to be tackled by the leadership of the Metropolitan Police. There clearly was evidence before, but that evidence is now becoming overwhelming.
It's extraordinary you say that the Met Police is the largest police force in the world. Perhaps... No, I didn't
no, sorry. I didn't say that. I said it's the largest police force in the British Isles.
Oh,
it is one of the largest police forces in the world. It is not the largest police force in the world. But it's right up there. Okay. It's one of the biggest.
Certainly very, very, very large. Given that, is it inevitable, therefore, that there are some bad apples? How do we define the difference between perhaps the inevitability of a huge organisation having some really rotten people in it compared to something that is more to do with the system itself?
It's very hard to unpick where all this begins and starts. Some, let's just call them bad apples for the sake of convenience this morning, get through the selection system. Not many, but some do. What happens then is they gather a momentum of opinion around them. What we've seen in the last probably 20 years, let's round about that, of course, now is the pernicious effect of social media that enables one to build a sort of coterie of like-minded people around you to share bad ideas, bad thoughts, bad language in what is perceived as a relatively safe online environment. And that builds up then the bad culture that you're seeking to prevent. So it's very difficult to unpick. It starts with clear leadership. But I think what Sir Mark Rowley is referring to now is the fact that he's not in control of the discipline machine. For about the last 20 years now, chief officers of police across the UK are not in control of discipline. That's been outsourced to organisations like the Independent Office of Police Conduct and local misconduct tribunals that actually undertake the business of hearing misconduct cases. So effectively, chief officers are not in control of their own discipline in the way that chief constables used to be in the past.
And so just finally, in our last minute or so, what should we take away from this news today? That potentially there is going to be some sort of crackdown on how the Metropolitan Police is run? Or should we take away that we should have more confidence or less confidence in it because of these revelations?
Well, we've got a very, very open system of policing in this country, and it's got more open in the last couple of decades, as the Casey report, which these remarks are based on, will demonstrate. So I think the public can have confidence in that. The new commissioner has signalled that he intends to beef up his internal investigation capability, but it does rely on good officers being prepared to come forward and basically tell senior officers of examples of misconduct in their midst, and then have confidence that the system will support them in their allegations. And clearly that confidence is lacking at the moment. That's the challenge, or one of the key challenges of Sir Mark Rowley's leadership, to get confidence internally back into his force that misconduct, bad behaviour, can be effectively challenged from within.
Well, Timothy Brain, former Chief of Gloucestershire Police, thank you so much for joining us here on To The Point. Really, really appreciate your views on the concerning news coming out of the Metropolitan Police this morning. Well, now let's return to our top story today. It's only a few minutes until we're expecting to hear some words from the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt. He's expected to deliver an emergency statement on, of course, the mini-budget of 3 weeks ago in an effort to reassure financial markets. We're expecting that now to come at around 1:15. GB News will bring you it in full as soon as it's out. Now, our economics and business editor has been studying the markets. Liam Halligan is with me here. What is going on? Where are the moves? Are things up? Are things down?
They're pretty much playing a waiting game at the moment, Tom. The pound is slightly up on the day. It's up towards $1.13, up from around $1.12. And the 10-year gilt yield that we've been discussing today, the sort of benchmark commercial rate of borrowing, the rate that the government borrows at, sets the tone. It ripples out across the economy for mortgages and personal loans. That's down slightly from around 4.3% to 4.1%. But it's worth just putting this in context. I mean, back at the beginning of the year, the pound was $1.35, and now it's $1.13. So it's clearly lost quite a bit. Now, some people would say, if you work for an exporter, whoopee-doo. That means our exports are more competitive overseas, so we get more revenue in.
Although their components would be more expensive as well.
If they import components, then those components will be more expensive. What's actually happened is a weaker pound. It means that we fire up our own manufacturing industry because we manufacture more components ourselves. Talk to people in the West Midlands. They love a weaker pound. They love a weaker pound. On the other hand, that weaker pound from $1.35 to $1.13 now, that imports inflation, because it's not just components, as you say. We import a lot of food in this country. Farmers don't like to hear that, but it's true. And we also import, of course, a lot of fuel, and fuel is priced in dollars. That makes that fuel more expensive. So a lower pound really injects inflation into the system, and that's part of the reason, I think, why the Bank of England should have been raising interest rates a lot earlier, because if you've got a higher interest rate, it attracts more investment from overseas, so-called hot money, and you have a stronger pound.
At least matching what the Federal Reserve in the United States do. We completely forget that all of this went on after the US raised rates by, 0.75%.
Yeah, did that three times in a row.
The euro is now worth less than the dollar.
Yeah.
We don't talk about this nearly enough.
Also, we see the Bank of England, this sort of, the cavalry coming in on their white chargers. They can do no wrong. The Bank of England has... Well, I've written it many times. They won't thank me for saying it, but the Bank of England has been woefully behind the curve. The Bank of England should have been raising interest rates long ago, deep into last year.
It might have been hard, but it would have been less volatile.
Way before the war in Ukraine, inflation in this country was already at a 30-year high. People like me kept writing that inflation is going to go up, you've got to get ahead of this. The Governor of the Bank of England kept saying, it's transitory, don't worry your pretty little head.
I remember talking to you about this on this very programme, about how inflation would become the biggest story, and you were bang on, completely right. Well, everyone listening and watching at home, please do keep your thoughts coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll get to them later in the programme. That's after this.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A classic north-south split today with lots of showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland, where it's also pretty windy for most of England and Wales. Brighton, breezy day with sunny spells and most places staying dry. We did start with some rain across the southeast. That's edging away from this weather front, this area of low pressure dominating further north. The isobars squeezing together, quite blustery for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and parts of northern England, with showers packing in across Scotland in particular. Starting to ease somewhat for Northern Ireland. One or two showers over the far north of England, but most of England and Wales dry and bright with plenty of October sunshine and temperatures getting up to 18, 19 degrees across the south. Cooler feel for Scotland and Northern Ireland with those gusty winds and frequent showers. The showers will be pretty heavy, but they should tend to zip through and they should ease off as we go through this evening, certainly from the central belt and across the south. We'll keep some showers going in northern Scotland. For England and Wales, it'll be dry and clear. It will turn quite foggy in places. Parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, central and southern England, some dense patches of fog are possible. Clouding over a little in the southwest with the breeze picking up. That should stop too much fog forming here. But getting to that time of year where fog can linger through the morning. So parts of Welsh Marches up towards northwest England, Northern Ireland, that fog may take most of the morning before it completely clears. One or two showers in the Northern Isles, but for most, it's a dry, fine day to come on Tuesday with sunny spells once that fog has disappeared. And again, pretty mild, especially in the south, 18, 19 degrees Celsius. As we go through Tuesday evening, not a great deal of change, but the winds will be picking up down to the southwest. Behind me gathering is a line of rain, and that could turn quite heavy as we go through Tuesday night and into Wednesday across the southwest. The rest of this week could be quite interesting. Some heavy bands of showers moving across the country, often quite blustery, but also really quite mild. Bye for now.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Good morning, this is To The Point on GB News with me, Tom Harwood. We're on your television, your radio and online. I'm here right through until midday and we'll be bringing you the very latest from Westminster as the Chancellor is expected to make an emergency statement in the next few minutes. We'll bring you that as soon as we have it. Make sure you get in touch with your views as well on all the rigmarole going on in Westminster as well. GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'll be getting to those throughout the show. But first, it's time for the latest headlines.
A very good morning. It's 11 o'clock. I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date on GB News. The newly appointed Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is preparing to deliver parts of his medium-term economic plan in the next half an hour. He's been in talks with the Prime Minister over the weekend, as well as the Governor of the Bank of England and the Debt Management Office, to brief them on his ideas. Jeremy Hunt's going to make a statement shortly. Then, this afternoon, he'll address the House of Commons, setting out measures which the Treasury says will provide fiscal sustainability. The Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury told us that mismanagement has undermined trust in the UK economy.
You see this panicked reaction where the Chancellor has to bring forward by 2 weeks his rescue package of a plan that was only announced 3 weeks before by the Prime Minister and his predecessor. Then you just see what chaos has been caused.
GB News has learned officers from the committee who choose how Conservative leaders are chosen, the 1922 committee, will meet later today. They can change the rules of leadership balloting and no confidence voting, which could lead to a leadership challenge. Well, it's after 3 Conservative MPs publicly called for mistrust to resign. In other news now, and the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, says hundreds of police officers should be sacked following a new report that was commissioned after the death of Sarah Everard. A review of the Met's internal misconduct system found that officers are getting away with criminal behaviour owing to an anything-goes attitude. The report described some of the police procedures as racist and misogynistic. The former Detective Superintendent, Shabnam Chowdhury, told us she's sickened by the report.
This isn't just a barrel of rotten apple. This is a disease that has spread across the Metropolitan Police, unfortunately. I don't deny that there are some fantastic officers. There are many good and hard-working officers who don't want this kind of behaviour, who have tried to call it out, who have tried to support those officers, but there are too many in the leadership roles that don't allow those complaints to go any further.
In Ukraine, Kyiv's been hit by several explosions caused by what they're calling kamikaze drones. Ukraine's presidential office says 3 people have been killed in the attacks. The Ukrainian Air Force say they've shot down 37 drones in the last 24 hours, which they believe are supplied to Russia by Iran. Several residential buildings have been damaged. There have been fires in a central district of the city. The Scottish Government will set out its economic plans for an independent country later today. The First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, says independence will lead to a fairer and wealthier Scotland. She also claims the UK's economic model is failing and holding the country back. The Supreme Court is currently deciding whether Scotland can hold a referendum on independence next October without the agreement of Westminster. 2 Just Stop Oil protesters have climbed to the top of the Dartford crossing, and that's forced police to close the bridge linking Essex and Kent. A spokesman for Essex Police said it may take some time to resolve the situation because of the difficulty in getting the protesters down safely. Well, Just Stop Oil spokesperson Samuel Johnson told GB News this morning the government's policy is going in the wrong direction.
We need to stand up to this government. We're in a cost of living crisis, we're in a climate emergency, and the government is going completely the wrong direction. The International Energy Agency has said we need no new oil. The United Nations has said we need no new oil. We are saying we need no new oil.
More than 400,000 health workers in England, Wales and Northern Ireland will be balloted over industrial action in a continuing set of disputes over pay. Unison says members of several health unions, including nursing and ambulance staff, as well as cleaners, will vote in the coming weeks on whether to walk out. It said the government decision to award a £1,400 pay rise in the summer had angered staff. Almost 1 million NHS workers could be involved in strike action before Christmas. The Manchester United footballers appeared in court this morning, charged with attempted rape, controlling and coercive behaviour and assault. Mason Greenwood was first held in January over allegations relating to a young woman after images and videos were posted on social media. The 21-year-old's been out on bail since, but was arrested in Manchester on Saturday for allegedly breaching his bail terms. The King will meet families from war-torn countries who've moved to Aberdeen today. It's part of a government scheme to resettle refugees in the city. The monarch will hear how Aberdeen City Council supported people from Ukraine, Syria and Afghanistan, as well as hearing personal stories from families on how they evacuated and how they've settled into the community. It's GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now let's head back to the point.
Very good morning to you. This is To The Point on GB News with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV, radio and online. Now here's what's coming up this morning. The new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, will bring forward new economic measures from the planned medium-term fiscal plan. He's planning to gut various bits of the remaining mini-budget. But how will the market react to this announcement? We'll have live coverage. The Chancellor will be making a statement shortly on those budget measures he's bringing forward to help stabilise the economy. But how might the Tory party react? And Prime Minister Liz Truss is facing being ousted as no confidence letters pile up to the 1922 committee chairman. She, of course, faces some calls to resign. We've got all that coming up and so much more across the programme, so don't miss a second. And please do get in touch with your views as usual. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, the new Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, will be making a statement very shortly, bringing forward measures from the medium-term fiscal plan. His idea here is to support fiscal sustainability. The announcement will come a fortnight earlier than expected for many of the components of it and will fast-track billions of pounds worth of tax rises and spending cuts. It comes as Liz Truss is facing more pressure this morning after 3 of her own MPs called on her to resign. And I'm delighted to be joined by one of those MPs right now. Crispin Blunt is the MP for Reigate. And Crispin, you were the first Member of Parliament, the first Conservative Member of Parliament, to call on Liz Truss to stand down. Why did you do so?
Well, it's a blinding glimpse of the obvious that the current situation is not sustainable. When your poll ratings with the public are in single figures, and we have a very difficult, challenging situation to present to the electorate and to carry the electorate through with us through some difficult economic decisions. You can't really start from a basis where your own economic policy has been exploded and you don't have the confidence, the combination of the country, of your parliamentary colleagues or the media to be then able to explain the difficult decisions that have got to be made. Jeremy Hunt's appointment is a necessary part of this, but it is absolutely not sufficient.
Now, you say, and you may well be right, that Liz Truss no longer carries support from the majority of your colleagues. But the question then that arises is, does anyone else? No one got more than around a third of members of Parliament backing them in the nominations to go then forward to the membership. One of the big issues with the defenestration of Boris Johnson was there was no clear successor. It looks like there's no one who can unite your party.
Well, I suspect if Rishi Sunak hadn't begun that leadership election campaign with the handicap of being held responsible for Boris's defenestration. And one needs to remember that there were scores of ministers who quit the government at the time. And Boris was very popular with the members. But despite that, starting with that handicap, Rishi was catching up very fast in the leadership election. And I suspect had the vote been at the end of the contest rather than during it, he would in the end have won. Now, for my money, he's probably the obvious candidate to take over, but this is going to need the senior members of the party to sit down and have a conversation about how to manage this, including 1922 and its executive, including a national union, to try and manage our way through the, frankly, pretty perilous position that we are in at the moment. But the status quo is not sustainable, and everybody knows that.
Now, Crispin Blunt, you were a supporter, of course, of Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak did talk a lot about how the inflation issue should be dealt with before any sort of large fiscal loosening measures came about. I do want to bring in now Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor. And Liam, firstly, Do you agree with Crispin that we'd be in a different situation had Rishi Sunak become Prime Minister?
Potentially, because I don't think Rishi Sunak would have made the mistake of presentation when it came to the mini-budget. But I think the basis of the policies would have been the same. Look, we're in the middle of just hearing rumours, speculation that the government could be seriously curtailing the energy price cap, making it not 2-year open-ended commitment, but ending it in April, so in 6 months. On that news, the 10-year gilt rate has plunged because that suggests that the government may have to borrow a lot less if we are exposed to very high wholesale gas prices on European markets, which would then mean the government had to borrow and spend lots of money to subsidise those energy prices.
Liam, hold that thought, because that is fascinating. And it potentially undermines a lot of the media commentary that we've been hearing for the last 3 weeks. That far from it being the couple of billion in tax cuts here or there that we were seeing, the 2 billion, for example, on the 45p rate, potentially the energy price guarantee was actually what spooked the markets the most. Crispin Blunt, what's your reaction to that?
Well, of course, we have no idea how much the energy price guarantee is going to cost the government.
Precisely.
It's not impossible that gas prices will continue to fall as they are doing, and it will end up that actually it won't cost the government a great deal. However, you're going to be quite a brave man to predict the gas price over the next 2 years. I would think that the longer the matters go on, the greater access there will be to alternative supplies of gas. And so I would expect the gas price to continue to fall in relative terms over the longer period. So it is probably okay then to end this support programme this April, if that's what's going to be proposed. But we don't know what the situation will be the following winter. And if prices have gone up, not down, then it's very difficult to see how you can avoid the kind of support that's being proposed at the moment.
Now, I'm hearing that we will be able to hear from the Chancellor in just a couple of minutes' time. But, Crispin, do you think that, therefore, the energy price guarantee, the open-ended commitment of it, the length of it as well, do you believe that was a mistake?
Well, a whole number of things that, taken together, have then proved to be a mistake in the eyes of the markets, in the eyes of the people who've got to lend the government the money to enable government to continue. And the combination of those mistakes has made that lending very much more expensive. That is now being repaired, as we're seeing with the price of debt now falling quite sharply, which is a good thing for everybody. It will continue to fall if the government actually gets a credible chief spokesman and Prime Minister. And for the next 2 years, if the Conservative Party can then present sound money and sound administration, and also address that part of Liz's agenda, which was agreed with actually across the board, about the need for supply-side measures to take advantage of control of our own regulations now out of the European Union in order to make our economy as competitive as we can and address what has been called the growth dilemma. So all of this can be an opportunity. And alongside this is the opportunity then for the Labour Party to make sure it's got its act together, because its fiscal policy looked horrifyingly similar to that being presented by Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, which did not survive contact with the markets.
Liam Halligan, your views on that. Does Crispin have a point here that potentially the changes we're seeing today, although in our earlier discussions we were sounding quite despondent about the inability of Parliament to carry forward even basic tax cuts, even reducing the tax burden to where it was just a couple of years ago, by this analysis from Crispin Blunt, things seem a little bit rosier. Do you share that?
I think his concerns about the energy price cap are real. I've been saying since the day of the mini-budget that what the market's really concerned about is the energy price cap. Crispin's right, of course, that the wholesale gas price has been falling, but that's mainly because West European countries, for the most part, have filled up their massive storage facilities, and the UK hasn't. That's why I'm afraid, and I say this with trepidation and regret, the UK is uniquely exposed because we have a lot less gas in storage. Yes, we can import gas from the US, so-called LNG, liquefied natural gas. We have docking ports for that, both on the west and the east coast. So we have that strategic advantage. But I suggest to Crispin, I don't want this to happen, but war in Ukraine could get a lot worse before it gets better. We're coming into the coldest part of the year, of course. So it's by no means guaranteed that that energy price cap will become less expensive. It's by no means guaranteed at all that wholesale gas prices in Western Europe will continue to fall. Let's wait until there's a squeeze. And if there is a squeeze, if the Kremlin really says no more gas going west at all, and it chucks all its gas elsewhere and east to China and so on, then those wholesale gas prices and thus the cost of the energy price cap could get a lot more punchy in the weeks and months ahead. I don't want that to happen, but I would suggest that financial markets, they didn't really care two jots about the top rate of tax, which the political class has fixated on, because it's such a small amount of money. They knew it would cause a lot of political controversy, but in terms of finance and hard brass tax, it's the energy price cap which is costing the serious money.
Now, on that, we have now had the Chancellor's statement. We're turning it around as quickly as we can and we'll play it out as soon as we can. But just some headline announcements from that statement. The Chancellor said that the basic rate of income tax is staying at 20% indefinitely. Now, we thought that it may well be delayed by a year, but it's actually staying there indefinitely. And in total, the measures taking, the Chancellor says, will raise £32 billion a year. The energy price guarantee will not be lasting beyond April. That's what the Chancellor has said in the last few minutes. And in addition, there have been no specific words about further spending cuts. But of course, the Prime Minister said just the other day that there will be efficiencies being asked of various government departments. The energy price guarantee savings are, of course, this one-off that lasts the next 18 months after that 6-month period, I suppose. But Crispin Blunt, your immediate reaction to these measures that the Chancellor's just announced?
Well, they seem sound, and the market response, I anticipate, will continue to be positive, and that we're serious about getting the nation's finances back under control. And once they're under control, and once the markets can be confident.
Well, Crispin, I'm just going to interrupt you here because we now have the words of the Chancellor. Let's listen to Jeremy Hunt.
Good morning. A central responsibility for any government is to do what's necessary for economic stability. This is vital for businesses making long-term investment decisions and for families concerned about their jobs, their mortgages and the cost of living. No government can control markets, but every government can give certainty about the sustainability of public finances. And that is one of the many factors that influence how markets behave. And for that reason, although the Prime Minister and I are both committed to cutting corporation tax, on Friday she listened to concerns about the mini-budget and confirmed we will not proceed with the cut to corporation tax announced. The government has today decided to make further changes to the mini-budget and to reduce unhelpful speculation about what they are. We've decided to announce these ahead of the medium-term fiscal plan, which happens in 2 weeks. I'll give a detailed statement to Parliament this afternoon and answer questions from MPs. But because these decisions are market sensitive, I've agreed with the Speaker the need to give an early, brief summary of the changes, which are all designed to provide confidence and stability. Firstly, we will reverse almost all the tax measures announced in the growth plan 3 weeks ago that have not started parliamentary legislation. So whilst we will continue with the abolition of the health and social care levy and stamp duty changes, we will no longer be proceeding with the cuts to dividend tax rates, the reversal of off-payroll working reforms introduced in 2017 and 2021, the new VAT-free shopping scheme for non-UK visitors, or the freeze on alcohol duty rates. Secondly, the government's current plan is to cut the basic rate of income tax to 19% from April 2023. It is a deeply held conservative value, a value that I share, that people should keep more of the money they earn. But at a time when markets are rightly demanding commitment to sustainable public finances, it is not right to borrow to fund this tax cut. So I've decided that the basic rate of income tax will remain at 20%, and it will do so indefinitely until economic circumstances allow for it to be cut. Taken together with the decision not to cut corporation tax and restoring the top rate of income tax, the measures I've announced today will raise every year around £32 billion. Finally, the biggest single expense in the growth plan was the energy price guarantee. This is a landmark policy supporting millions of people through a difficult winter. And today I want to confirm that the support we are providing between now and April next year will not change. But beyond that, the Prime Minister and I have agreed it would not be responsible to continue exposing public finances to unlimited volatility in international gas prices. So I'm announcing today a Treasury-led review into how we support energy bills beyond April next year. The objective is to design a new approach that will cost the taxpayer significantly less than planned, whilst ensuring enough support for those in need. Any support for businesses will be targeted to those most affected, and the new approach will better incentivise energy efficiency. The most important objective for our country right now is stability. Governments cannot eliminate volatility in markets, but they can play their part, and we will do so, because instability affects the prices of things in shops, the cost of mortgages, and the values of pensions. There will be more difficult decisions, I'm afraid, on both tax and spending, as we deliver our commitment to get debt falling as a share of the economy over the medium term. All departments will need to redouble their efforts to find savings, and some areas of spending will need to be cut. But as I promised at the weekend, our priority in making the difficult decisions that lie ahead will always be the most vulnerable. And I remain extremely confident about the UK's long-term economic prospects as we deliver our mission to go for growth. But growth requires confidence and stability, and the United Kingdom will always pay its way. This government will therefore take whatever tough decisions are necessary to do so. Thank you.
New Chancellor Jeremy Hunt there giving his update, bringing forward some of those announcements on the medium-term fiscal plan. Of course, at around 3:30 this afternoon, he'll be taking detailed questions in Parliament on these measures and will probably spell out a little bit more. But this was something that he said in that statement was agreed with the Speaker of the House of Commons. Because these are market-sensitive measures, they were to be announced this morning. Of course, that breaks with convention that new policy should be announced to the House of Commons first. But given he has done this in agreement with the Speaker of the House of Commons, that shouldn't be too much of an issue. Let's bring back in Liam Halligan and indeed Crispin Blunt. And Crispin, let's start with you. Was this Chancellor Scrooge or Chancellor Sensible?
Well, it's a combination of the two, I suppose. But Chancellor Sensible was, I think, principally on display. He may have to be Scrooge at some point in terms of public expenditure, but he's obviously yet to spell that out. And departments are going to have to look at their expenditure plans. There may be some rather difficult decisions taken around development and defence, for example, and those may be pretty tough calls to be made alongside domestic expenditure. And we're going to have to decide what our priorities are, because the security of the United Kingdom in Europe, for me, is a very important issue. And I would be, I'm distressed that we are at the cuts to the development budget. And if we cut defence or the promises around defence as well, then we won't be advancing our national security or stability in Europe, which is one of the wider questions that we've got to engage with.
Now, Liam Halligan, you've been following the markets as that statement was made. What's happened?
The immediate market response seems to be quite positive, not overwhelmingly, because a lot of the stuff's been, frankly, leaking out via social media all morning. What I would say is this. Why did Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng want the energy price cap to last 2 years in the first place? Because it takes a long time to find alternative energy sources. It takes a long time to get new nuclear plant up and running or to encourage energy companies to exploit more oil and gas in the North Sea. It takes a long time even to arrange for more imports of liquefied natural gas from other countries. That's why the energy price cap was for 2 years. It was kind of a show of force and intent to the Kremlin. And geopolitically, you have to say, while we've got some time until April, this is a sort of slight surrender, a slight weakening in terms of how we are going to prepare our population and our businesses, our economy as a whole, for an ongoing economic war with Russia. And so that jumps out at me. The other thing that jumps out at me is that an awful lot of small businesses will be really upset by this. They will think that there's been a political parlour game going on between warring factions of the Conservative Party, and as a result, their freezing of corporation tax at 19% is now going to be 25%. That takes 6% off your margin if you're a small or medium-sized business. And after COVID, for many companies, I'm afraid that could be catastrophic.
Well, we are going to have to leave the economic conversation there. I really do appreciate your time, Crispin Blunt. Thank you for joining us throughout that landmark statement. And Liam Halligan, also, who's with us throughout these 2 hours this morning. Let's bring in now Martin Baxter, the CEO of Electoral Calculus. These are political polling experts. Now, first of all, Martin, what do you think the public might have made of this? Because what Jeremy Hunt was saying there is, frankly, we're not going to cut your taxes. In some areas, we're going to put up your taxes, and we're not going to support you with energy costs for as long as you thought. But to some extent, the markets have responded well. It's very hard to gauge where the public will be on this.
Yeah, that's a great point, Tom, because really what's happening is almost in a way the markets are talking to the British public via Jeremy Hunt. And the markets are saying, we want taxes to go up and we want spending to go down. And Jeremy Hunt is saying that. He's saying that there have to be, in his words, difficult decisions on those two. And I think we know what that means. And so the markets are forcing the government to tell the people that, because essentially the national credit card has kind of run out of slack, and you can't just keep whizzing it through the cash machine. So, but politically, that may not be a very welcome message. On the other hand, the Conservatives may be thinking that they've got to do something different for the markets, but politically they're in a dreadful mess anyway. Our latest poll that we just did this morning, or a poll of polls, has got Labour 26% ahead, 26%. Labour need about 10% to form a government with a majority. 26% would give them a massive majority. On our figures, we've actually got the Conservatives not even in second place, not even the official opposition. That would be the SNP. The Conservatives would have potentially 4 seats fewer than that. So the Conservatives are in a very deep political hole. So Jeremy Hunt, I guess, is thinking that if he stops digging and gives bad news to the British public, that might go down better than the go for growth strategy that Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng put forward a few weeks ago. But of course, it's an open question as to whether people want to hear this news about higher taxes and lower spending, because it's not been the political dynamic for the last couple of decades now.
For the last few months, the Conservatives have lost what was once a considerable lead over the Labour Party on the issue of the economy. Now, forgetting all of the headline rates, it's issue rates that are sometimes very, very interesting. And, for example, Ed Miliband never led on the question of the economy from the 2010 to 2015 Parliament and never led on the issue of leadership. Keir Starmer now leads on both of those points. Is it possible for the Tories to turn things around?
Well, you're right. Sort of every indicator we can measure is flashing red for the Conservatives. There's very little good news around for them in the polls at all. That's, more bad news there, that the Conservatives have, as you say, traditionally had a lead on the economy. Even if they're perceived as the nasty party, they were the sensible nasty party. They potentially lost that. I guess Jeremy Hunt is trying to recover some of that ground and saying, look, the truth is not very pleasant, but we're going to do the necessary things to get the economy back on track. If he gets that message, may resonate with the British public, and we might see a turnaround in the opinion polls. Conservatives have to hit bottom at some point, you might think. So if he can turn that around, then that will be potentially better news for the Conservatives than Hunt a while, but there's still a very long way to go before they're back in contention with Labour. I guess we'll probably see market reaction before we see the public's reaction. It'll take a few days and before we've got a reliable set of opinion polls to see where this is landing. But, it is tough. He's having to sell bad news to a country that doesn't much like the Conservatives at the moment. That's a tough gig.
Yes, who'd have the gig? I suppose one point of light for the Chancellor is, of course, he does now seem to be almost entirely in control of what this government does. And Liz Truss almost there sitting as the face in front of the curtain, Jeremy Hunt, the man behind the curtain, pulling all the levers. Martin Baxter, we're going to have to leave it there. We're going to go to the news, but thank you so much for joining us on To The Point this morning. And we'll have to get back to you in 3 or 4 days' time, once those opinion polls, as you say, have had time to percolate and give us some data. Well, after the break, we'll be getting more reaction from the Chancellor's emergency new measures. But before that, here's the news in the round.
It's 11:33. Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright, keeping you up to date. The Chancellor has announced a reversal of almost all of the tax measures announced in the mini-budget. In the last half an hour, Jeremy Hunt unveiled parts of his medium-term economic plan a fortnight earlier than expected. He said energy bill support could be scaled back as part of the budget overhaul. Mr Hunt added the decision not to cut corporation tax and restoring the top rate of income will raise around £32 billion a year. The Chancellor said he remained extremely confident about the country's long-term economic prospects. GBNews has learned officers of the 1922 committee will meet later amid growing calls from some Conservative MPs for the Prime Minister to step down. Well, the committee's executive can change the rules of leadership balloting and no confidence voting, which could lead to a leadership challenge. 3 Conservative MPs have publicly called for Ms Truss to resign. Other news now, and the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, says hundreds of police officers should be sacked following the findings of a new report commissioned after the murder of Sarah Everard. A review of the Met's internal misconduct system found officers are getting away with criminal behaviour. The report described some of the police procedures as racist and misogynistic. The Ukrainian Air Force says it's shot down 37 Russian drones in the last 24 hours. Ukraine's presidential office says 3 people have been killed following so-called kamikaze drone attacks on the capital this morning. Several residential buildings have been damaged and there's fires in a central district of the city. 19 people have been rescued from the rubble, with search and rescue work ongoing. TV, online and your DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
It's 11:38. This is To The Point with me, Tom Harwood. We're live on your television, your online computer and your DAB radio this morning. Well, Chancellor Jeremy Hunt held an emergency statement just a few minutes ago on his new mini-budget measures. He said, of course, that we're not going to be taking forward that reduction to the rate of the lowest rate of income tax, that even the Sunak plan of bringing the 19p cut next year is now got rid of. The basic rate of income tax will remain at 20% in perpetuity. Also, that energy price guarantee, the most expensive part of the entire mini-budget, something that was not particularly profoundly commented upon over the last few weeks by the media, well, that now stops in April. There'll be a review of what should replace it. Whatever it will be, it'll be cheaper. Well, let's discuss this all now in terms of what it means for the economy at large. I'm joined by Justin Urquhart-Stewart, the economist and market commentator from Seven Investment Management. And of course, Liam Halligan is with us too as well. Justin, first of all, is this what you were expecting? The idea that the energy price guarantee would be reduced not by half, but by 3/4, that seems to have taken some people by surprise.
Well, yes, I really wasn't expecting that at all. You know, it's expensive enough and it's badly structured. We shouldn't be doing it. What you should be trying to do is actually focus it on those people who are really going to be suffering for it. Obviously, the poorest, maybe those on benefit. You can then find a way of targeting it much more. Now, that does surprise me. I'm interested to see, actually, then, how that's going to be left. Because is it going to be 2 years again, or have they roll back on that one?
So it's going to end now in April, the universal guarantee.
Right.
And we were told that there will be a Treasury-led review into what replaces it for the following 18 months. Now, it does seem that after Liz Truss became Prime Minister off the back of getting rid of the Treasury orthodoxy, taking charge from Number 10, now it seems like the biggest parts of government policy are being determined by the Treasury.
Well, they would be useful. I mean, bear in mind, all chancellors disagree with their prime minister. And this is a rather exceptional circumstance at the moment, because actually the prime minister, I think, actually works for the chancellor, so it's the other way around. But no, I mean, what was been interesting is, and we have to wait to see what the proper fallout is. The one thing we want him to do is just calm the market down and give people a little bit of confidence. And we don't want the headlines we saw in the Times today that actually overseas investors are comparing us to the financial arrangements of Greece. When people start talking like that, you know, we need to work really hard to focus on those areas where we've got a great reputation, which is good financial services area, and also in terms of technology and those smaller businesses. So, I mean, the two things that really I was hoping we'd get to see is a real proper investigation as to how you actually provide that that energy support, rather than just throwing shed loads of money at the stuff, which is not the answer. And the other one actually is corporation tax, because you know we are setting up more small businesses than France and Germany. I keep on boring Liam with this, but we're actually rather good at developing these businesses. That's the time you should be encouraging them with smaller tax on that.
So that is potentially a worry. I wonder though. Let's bring in Liam Halligan, because the United Kingdom is not Greece. We've got lower tax. We've got a lower debt burden, I should say, not tax. We've got very high tax. We've got a lower debt burden than most G7 countries. Why have the markets taken fright? Why are we being compared to Greece when our solvency is nothing like comparable?
Because people in the city who've got massive short positions on sterling are giving journalists a good headline, we're like Greece, and so they put it in their newspapers. It doesn't make it true. Our public finances are completely different to Greece, not least the outstanding stock of debt. Though there are, of course, concerns about the energy price cap. I think now that we've gone to 6 months, which was Labour's policy, by the way, that will be difficult for Liz Truss to swallow, then I do think the markets will calm down a little bit. We should say that the national insurance cut that is going through, that amounts to about 19 billion of the overall £45 billion tax-cutting package that former Chancellor Kwasi Kwarteng originally brought to the fore. But I say again, in my view, this is a lot more of a political crisis than an economic crisis. The UK is still growing pretty well. We still have many, many world-class companies. We still have relatively low unemployment. There are many people out there making money, employing people, keeping the wheels of commerce and prosperity turning. But you know, when I say this is more of a political crisis, but what a political crisis it is. And it strikes me, it goes back to something that I was discussing with Norman Lamont at the beginning of last week, the former Chancellor, of course. He said to me, and I think he's right, a lot of the problem here is that you only need 15% of Tory MPs to change the Prime Minister. Yeah. That's a ridiculously small electorate, if you like. That bar should surely go up because it's very difficult to manage a country when you have a Conservative Party. It's always been a broad church, Tom, you know that well, and all you need is 15% of MPs to, spook an existing Prime Minister and effectively turf them out of office. And also, Prime Ministers always have to do things that are difficult. Yes. That's what leadership is.
Do you think the Conservative Party is now ungovernable? These are a lot of people who got in to Parliament off the back of one of these leadership contests and then the subsequent 2019 general election. These are people who were forged in the flames of turfing out leaders, of defenestration, of regicide. Does that mean now that they are addicted to it?
Well, whether or not a party is governable, a parliamentary party, depends on the people. And you're right, that 2019 intake, they're young and they're ambitious. Some of them that I talk to, they actually want to lose so they can have some time out of office, let the economic difficulties pass, Labour take the blame, then they can come in all shiny and new and a bit more experienced. But it also depends, not just on the people, it depends on the rules. And for me, a 15% hair trigger share of the parliamentary party can spark a vote of a leadership election. Madness, particularly in times of economic difficulty when prime ministers, Conservative leaders have to take really tough decisions that a lot of their backbenchers aren't going to like. For my money, that 15% level, it has to go up, 30, 40, even 50%.
Very, very interesting there, because, of course, stability matters. And Justin Urquhart-Stewart, businesses do they respond to those sort of political discussions that we're hearing about now? Does it matter that the officers of the 1922 committee are meeting today?
Well, to most businesses, no. What they are upset about, quite rightly, is someone keeps on changing the rules. I want an economy which is dull. We don't want excitement. Keep it dull so I can carry on doing my business and stop mucking around with all these elements which are important to those people who've got pointy heads in Westminster who love having internal arguments. But frankly, for the rest of us, we're trying to run an economy. As Liv said, our economy is in not such bad shape. We've got some nasty rocks we've got to try and avoid. So does everybody else. So if you could actually keep ourselves off the headlines, that would be really helpful indeed. Confidence. Confidence, not a confidence trick.
So does that mean, therefore, that actually Mr. Dull himself, the great plastic bollard, as Boris Johnson coined him in his farewell speech to Parliament, Sir Keir Starmer, could do well attracting business support now to Labour simply because they'll say, look, we're not going to do anything exciting. We're practically not going to do anything at all. In fact, we may well freeze our stagnating economy in aspic. But that might be preferable.
Well, you only have to go back to the days of Mr. Mandelson with his prawn cocktail attack on the city, going around seeing all the major banks and institutions, telling them that new Labour is different from old Labour, and this is how we're going to do it. It all sounded remarkably familiar. And again, businesses will like that. Don't give any nasty shocks. And so, yes, that's what they must do. They must make themselves, forget the left of the party, have the central ground, almost don't get into too many arguments. The Tories are shooting themselves in the foot very, very successfully. Let them carry on doing it. If I were him, keep my trap shut for the moment.
And Liam, should we now be analysing Labour's economic policy, potentially scrutinising it just as heavily as the government's? Because look at where they are in the polls. Most people assume that Sir Keir Starmer is going to waltz into Downing Street in the next couple of years. Is it time we really turn our attention to what they're planning?
Well, we would if we could, if we knew what they wanted to do. This is the issue. Justin's right. When your opponent is, shooting themselves in the foot, don't get in the way of the flying bullets. Let them do it. In Keir Starmer, I think Labour have somebody who isn't as scary as Jeremy Corbyn. I don't think much of the appeal to the electorate goes beyond that, though that is a significant improvement on the previous Labour leader, at least in electoral terms. In Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, somebody who will become a household name if she wants to over the next weeks and months. Labour has somebody who passes... Here's a phrase that came to the fore during that prawn cocktail offensive when, of course, Labour stalwarts in opposition like Mo Mowlam, John Smith, Gordon Brown, they went round the city. Did they pass the boardroom sniff test? That was what it was called. Rachel Reeves does pass the boardroom sniff test, and I say that I'm not wishing to denigrate her in any way. She's a credible person. She worked at the Bank of England for a while. There aren't many frontline politicians who can say that, and she's clearly an economically literate person. But the moment she starts giving interviews to the likes of me about her policies, of course, the left of the party is going to go bonkers, and then you've got a Labour split story. So why would they say anything?
Yeah.
So I'm literally, as we speak, WhatsApping her people saying, come on, you've got to do something here. We are Red Wall Television. You've got to talk to us. I'm not expecting an invitation anytime soon, because if I was advising her, I'd tell her not to be interviewed by me.
Well, let's hope that her advisors aren't watching this while they're WhatsApping you. But we will return to this, of course. Labour splits is a very interesting and evergreen story, but Tory splits is the order of the day today. Let's talk now to the former Treasurer of the Conservative Party, Lord Marland. Lord Marland, thank you for joining us. It is extraordinary to see government policy being now firmly led from the Treasury. What do you make of what the new Chancellor had to say just 45 minutes ago?
Well, it's just an extraordinary situation, as you say, which is going to divide the Conservative Party, but also divide the electorate. The Conservatives were elected to be fiscally responsible. They've now done a complete U-turn on what a lot of people would have hoped was a lower tax, lower regulatory government, which was what Brexit promised us. And now they're going back to the global groupthink of high tax, high spend, and that really isn't what the Conservatives were elected for. So it's going to be a real dichotomy. And also, of course, Liz Truss won amongst the membership because she was announcing on those particular subjects. So that's gone into reverse. It'll be very interesting to see how people respond within the Conservative Party.
And indeed, how the people around the Conservative Party interact with that party. As former treasurer of the party, you will have been schmoozing businesses, schmoozing donors, trying to attract people to donate, frankly, to the party to keep it going.
Well, that was a long time ago. I think that was a long time ago. I think it's more relevant to talk about when I was a minister, when I was trying to persuade businesses to relocate to the United Kingdom, and with George Osborne, we came across. We decided a reduction to demonstrate a reduction in corporation tax. So giving businesses a far sight as to what corporation tax they were paying. And as a result, businesses repatriated, particularly in the insurance market, from the States, from Bermuda, from Ireland, back into the United Kingdom. Now, all those who are in business, and I'm in business myself and have been all my life, except for when I was in government, obviously, we're now thinking, well, 25% corporation tax, 45% high rate taxation, a very significant national insurance tax.
Yes.
Is our future going to be in investing in our businesses, where we have to pay these very high cost of running a business, or is it going to be investing outside the United Kingdom? And that will be what will happen in every business I speak to at the moment. That's their thought process.
That is a really, really
significant
profound point, of course,
reverse in the country's fortunes.
There is a reason why Liz Truss kept talking about the 70-year high tax burden of this country during her leadership contest. There's a reason why Conservative members overwhelmingly backed her to become Prime Minister, to reduce that. And of course, when your time as a business minister, I remember the Conservative Party putting out not only messages amongst the business community, but frankly adverts to the electorate saying, look, we brought down corporation tax and the receipts went up. We got more money because we reduced this tax. How on earth have we gone through the looking glass now to precisely the opposite state of affairs?
Well, I can't disagree with you at all. I mean, I'm thinking what you're thinking, as they say, and that is the problem the country is going to face. I've said on your programme before that what people are looking for is the Brexit dividend. That this country has got to be 10% more competitive than Europe and the United States in particular, in terms of tax and in terms of regulation. And I'm afraid we're heading down the route of neither. Understandably, taxes have had to go up because of the terrible shocks the system has had. But I feel very sorry for Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng. They set out their stall. They've been let down by the Bank of England. They've been let down by the pension industry, who were allowed, under Gordon Brown it was, I think, who encouraged the pension industry to move from equities to bonds, and because the returns on bonds were so low, the yield on bonds, they had to arbitrage in order to get a decent return. This has now come home to roost. The Bank of England had to inject money into the system in order to prevent it. And then, of course, we've had the issue of the Bank of England being behind the curve in terms of interest rates, allowing inflation to run away before they put the brakes on it earlier than they have done now. And so the country is suffering from inadequate fiscal management by the non-government entities. And I feel sorry for them in that regard. And the groupthink that the Western world has won the battle against reform of tax and spend. And this is going to be a very interesting time. Maybe the groupthink is right. Maybe Kwasi and Liz were right. We will find out in the due course.
Well, it'll be fascinating to follow every twist and turn if indeed this government does survive the next 2 weeks through to that medium-term fiscal statement. Lord Marland, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Point this morning. Thank you. And now just finally to round off with Liam Halligan, Lord Marland seemed to be reflecting some of the points that you were raising earlier, that the Bank of England, frankly, had been asleep at the wheel, particularly on these rate rises, leaving the government, I suppose, exposed.
A very thoughtful interview there from Lord Marland. I thought he's clearly a very sophisticated individual from a financial point of view, as you'd expect of big cheese in the Conservative Party. It is important to put this in context. The Bank of England has been very, very slow to raise interest rates, which means they'll have to go up further than they otherwise would have done. I think the regulators have for many years been very remiss, allowing pension funds to get involved in what we call leverage strategies. That means pension funds which should do very, very safe things. They're taking on debt and investing by borrowing to invest, so that if their investments come off and they get a return, those returns are bigger because they've borrowed lots of money in order to place a bigger bet, if you know what I mean. But that can go wrong. Why are pension funds doing that? It goes back to the fact, Tom, that we've had ultra-low interest rates since 2009, since the global financial crisis. This is one of the dangers of quantitative easing that very few people have been banging on about for the last 10 years. I happen to be one of them. It's because gilt yields were less than the rate of inflation, pension funds were pushed into the gilt yields by regulators. They couldn't get a return to pay people's pensions, so they leveraged to try and magnify their returns.
And yet the medicine will be incredibly harsh, because as we know, people really don't like interest rate rises. Well, that's it from us this morning on To The Point, but do not go anywhere. Of course, the Chancellor will be standing up at the dispatch box of the House of Commons, we expect, at 3:30 this afternoon. And there's so much to discuss, so much to look forward to in terms of that big statement and the proper questioning for the first time of our new Chancellor. Do not go anywhere. No doubt Liam Halligan will be providing the expert analysis throughout the day here. Don't go away. It's Gloria and Mark next.
Alex Deakin here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. A classic north-south split today with lots of showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland, where it's also pretty windy for most of England and Wales. Brighton, breezy day with sunny spells and most places staying dry. We did start with some rain across the southeast. That's edging away from this weather front, this area of low pressure dominating further north. The isobars squeezing together, quite blustery for Northern Ireland, southern Scotland and parts of northern England, with showers packing in across Scotland in particular. Starting to ease somewhat for Northern Ireland. One or two showers over the far north of England, but most of England and Wales dry and bright with plenty of October sunshine and temperatures getting up to 18, 19 degrees across the south. Cooler feel for Scotland and Northern Ireland with those gusty winds and frequent showers. The showers will be pretty heavy, but they should tend to zip through and they should ease off as we go through this evening, certainly from the central belt and across the south. We'll keep some showers going in northern Scotland. For England, Wales, it'll be dry and clear. It will turn quite foggy in places. Parts of Wales, Northern Ireland, central and southern England, some dense patches of fog are possible. Clouding over a little in the southwest with the breeze picking up. That should stop too much fog forming here. But getting to that time of year where fog can linger through the morning. So parts of Welsh Marches up towards northwest England, Northern Ireland, that fog may take most of the morning before it completely clears. One or two showers in the Northern Isles, but for most, it's a dry, fine day to come on Tuesday with sunny spells once that fog has disappeared. And again, pretty mild, especially in the south, 18, 19 degrees Celsius. As we go through Tuesday evening, not a great deal of change, but the winds will be picking up down to the southwest. Behind me gathering is a line of rain, and that could turn quite heavy as we go through Tuesday night and into Wednesday across the southwest. The rest of this week could be quite interesting. Some heavy bands of showers moving across the country, often quite blustery, but also really quite mild. Bye for now.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness, brilliant.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.